So let me introduce myself. My name is David Giordano. I'm the database administrator for NC OneMap at CGIA. And my coworker is Brett Spivey, who is our web developer savant extraordinaire, whichever. So we're the two primary people for NC OneMap, and we were intimately involved in the migration from our on-prem environment to Amazon Web Services for NC OneMap, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So first, the obligatory who we are slide. We work for CGIA, which is a state agency in the Department of Information Technology. We've been around for over 40 years now with the mission to advance the use of GIS technology as a tool to support better decision-making in North Carolina. One of the things we are responsible for is staff support to the Geographic Information Coordinating Council, or GICC, as you probably know it, and its 5 subcommittees. We coordinate geospatial initiatives through NC OneMap, which results in cost-effective ways to create, access, and apply geographic data. We also, I can't see the slide very well, but we also engage the GIS community through the GICC, and lo and behold, this GIS conference as well. We also assist in implementing the statewide data directives and priorities of the GICC. So things like the NC OneMap orthorimagery program, Address NC, NC Parcels, and NC OneMap. So just a word about the longest running GICC initiative, which is NC OneMap. For those that don't know, we kind of consider it the first stop shop for GIS data in North Carolina. The program works to create authoritative statewide data through collaboration and data sharing amongst all stakeholders in the state to make that data freely available to anyone who needs it. It involves multiple data partners from all levels of government, state, local, and federal. The data from the partners comprise a diverse cross-section, if you will, of information from transportation to environment, agriculture, public safety, political administrative boundaries, so on and so forth, just to name a few of them. CGIA manages NC OneMap, we are also a data contributor. So things like statewide orthorimagery, parcels, and address points are all initiatives that we are responsible for. You may not know that we don't directly control all the content in NC OneMap. We keep the data custodian involved, and the data stays in their house, so to speak. Then they just provide web links to ArcGIS Online, and we just support those redirects, if you will, which kind of is the preferred method. We don't want to have to collect all the data and just spit it back out. We want to keep the data with the contributor if possible. So let's start discussing our journey to the cloud. So really we were concerned with 2 things. We were concerned about the NC OneMap application, the front end, and the web services that are contained in it. It's critical that both of those in the cloud infrastructure is robust enough to support the fluctuating demand that's placed on them, whether it's in daily use, normal daily use, or whether it's to support an emergency, a flood, a hurricane, so on and so forth. Because many of the those statewide data sets have become integral to the daily business of a lot of different users. So it's critical for that information to be available when it's needed. So we thought the easier migration would be the front end to ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Hub. The heavier lift was tackling the ArcGIS server environment and getting it up to snuff where it could support our users adequately. As you can figure out from the title of our presentation, it's about our migration to the cloud, and we did that, completed it in the summer of 2022. So we are now fully operational in Amazon Web Services. For those that have been around a while, like Brett and I have, you might remember the old geospatial portal around 2010 era. That was our public-facing front end. It ran on Esri's GeoPortal server, and we got good use out of it, about 10 years worth. It was an on-prem architecture, the whole enterprise was. So we had one web server, one GIS machine running standalone ArcGIS server, and then one database machine running Microsoft SQL Server in our department's network ops center. Data, as I said earlier a minute ago, we kind of wanted to keep the data with the custodian. Back then, we kind of collected, stored, and distributed, published all the data that you would find in NC OneMap back then. So why did we want to upgrade? GeoPortal server had become a bear to maintain. Neither Brett or I are Java developers, but it was a Java-based application, and we had some security vulnerabilities pop up rather frequently, and we were getting the nudge from our IT department to patch those, and it just became more and more difficult. Not to mention, we just needed a more pleasantly looking front end, if you will. And if you remember what the old one looked like, I had a screenshot a moment ago. It's changed considerably for the better, we think. In the ArcGIS server world, we kind of wanted to meet the demand of the highly used web services, orthoimagery being one of them, and just be able to provide that under load in the immediate need of an impending hurricane or whatnot. So this is the newish front end. It's hard to believe, but it's been around for about 3.5 years already. As I said, we transitioned from GeoPortal server to Hub, and the actual migration came about. The migration of the front end came about during the time we were starting to discuss how we're going to move the entire enterprise and infrastructure to the cloud. So the front end we thought was a quick and easy win, and we were right. Mostly because of the prevalent use of ArcGIS Online in North Carolina state government departments. So sharing items between AGOL organizational accounts is really easy. So DEQ, for example, would just share whatever items they wanted to share with NC OneMap, AGOL, and we'd add those to an AGOL group that ArcGIS Hub can see, and whatever's in that group is what's shared with Hub, and it's what you see on the NC OneMap website. So it was really, really easy. Another factor is the existence of the North Carolina ESRI ELA, Enterprise Agreement, in which Hub and ArcGIS Online are included. So that mechanism was already there, and there were no, additional negotiations that needed to happen, and there are no additional out-of-pocket costs for it. So what kind of factors were involved in choosing the platform? First and foremost is cost. That's on everybody's mind. You might be surprised to hear this, but you may save money or you may not. We'll just keep that in mind, and Brett will have more to say about that later on. The level of effort to stand up the enterprise into the cloud really is another factor. We were fortunate that we had really good internal department support and vendor support from Amazon, because you may or may not be shocked to hear this, a lot of what you would do is not GIS related at all. It's a lot of IT stuff. The last factor really is scalability, and you'll hear that word throughout this presentation. So we needed to have a system that would scale in and out automatically to meet demand. That was really, really important for us. So I think I let the cat out of the bag, but we did choose Amazon Web Services in part for a number of reasons. There's an existing contract between our department and Amazon, so the contract was in place, and there was no additional negotiations that needed to happen to kind of hold up the migration. Things were ready to roll contractually from that point. Esri provides templates that will assist you in building your cloud presence. So it'll build instances or servers, establish security groups, so on and so forth, to kind of give you a jump start when you start to migrate. Another reason is there's no hardware to maintain since it's in the cloud, so everybody can focus on the cool GIS stuff and not have to worry a lot about hardware maintenance. Scalability was there. Again, there's that word. So we could scale in and out to meet demand. And the beauty really is, unlike on-prem environments, in the cloud, if you're not using your machine, you're not paying for it. So you can turn it off, so to speak, and you wouldn't pay for it until it comes back on. And really support. We had a really good knowledge base to draw from because of the contracts that already existed. The in-house and the vendor teams were extremely knowledgeable and really indispensable to help us along the way. So in the middle tier and the back end, this is kind of what it looks like now. So we are running ArcGIS Enterprise 10.9.1. We have that scalability environment available to us, and we do have a disaster recovery mechanism available as well. If you, I'll just say you don't have a true enterprise if you don't have a way to recover from a disaster. So those things were tested for us, and they were tested successfully. There's a utility in ArcGIS called WebGIS-DR. Get to know it and use it and test against it to make sure you can recover in the event of a disaster. The back end, the database side of things, we use Amazon Aurora with the Postgres compatibility. Aurora is Amazon's in-house relational database service. It's compatible with two RDBMSs, Postgres and MySQL. We chose Postgres because Esri supports it. And so that's the back end. And the beauty of that is there's no RDBMS software licensing. Postgres is open source, so there's no SQL or Oracle costs involved. And because it's a service, managed service by Amazon, a lot of the traditional DBA requirements are offloaded and automated because it is a service. So this is our resulting setup. Simplistically, this is kind of what things look like. So we have our client desktops there on the left, and then we use either a secure shell or a remote desktop to get into the instances in the cloud where we run 10.9.1. As I said, our databases are in Aurora, and we use Amazon S3 or simple storage service to store a lot of our larger raster products, mainly the ortho imagery and the elevation data from emergency management, which we swear is going to be coming online here hopefully soon once we get our act together and can produce those products. And then we have a series of servers or instances in the cloud as well that have ArcGIS Pro on them, so we really don't need Pro on our client machines anymore. We can just RDP into an instance in the cloud and run Pro from that server. So that's pretty much it in summary. I hope we're doing well on time, but Brett has a lot more to follow into on detail. Am I setting you up for failure?
I've got 3 minutes.
Really? Oh, I hope not.
How do you forward it? This? Yeah, that one's back. Okay. Good morning, everybody. So we do have some content left a little bit, and we'll go ahead and run through it. So there we go. So David talked about the NC OneMap side, the ArcGIS Online side, in general, why we went over to the cloud or started to consider it. But there was one, or I should say two, catalysts that really pushed our thinking on this and said we had to do something. You know, we had our infrastructure since 2010. The Ortho Imagery project had come online, and we were patching the servers, patching the databases, upgrading software. Life wasn't terrible, but life was pretty good. And then in 2016 and then in 2018, two friends of ours, bad friends, Florence and Matthew, decided to pay North Carolina a visit. And in both of those instances, our infrastructure was totally overwhelmed. In 2016, Ortho Imagery was hit. And in both of these storms, if you'll remember, that it wasn't the wave action, the storm surge, the winds that really caused all the pain and damage. It was the floodwaters, and the floodwaters that remained for days. And on that first storm when that hit, our orthoimagery service in particular was just getting pounded. And our infrastructure was to the point to where we were not able to provide the information to the people when they needed it most. And to our, I guess we should have not discounted it quite as much as we did, but it had never happened before. And we said, okay, this was a once in a 500-year storm. What are the chances this would happen again? Well, it happened again 2 years later. And the exact same thing happened. Emergency management had a product called the Flood Inundation Mapping Network. Local media picked up on it, and they were getting millions of hits per hour, and offloaded some of that for the orthoimagery to our orthoimagery service, to the point to where, again, within several seconds, our total infrastructure collapsed. And again, what's the point of doing all of this work if you can't provide the information to the folks that need it when they need it? So that was really the catalyst for us. So in terms of migration, so what are some factors that you might think about if you're considering migration? Well, they might be economic. They might be what we call future-proofing, or I'll use the word agility. Or it might be some other reason, like thou shalt. I call it the quote-unquote thou shalt. Maybe your larger organization has said you should move to the cloud. And as David alluded to, if you're thinking economically, so maybe your operational costs may go down, they may not. But you also have to take into account that your hardware costs are not going to be fixed. It's part of the marketing that the cloud providers always say, but it's actually true. I mean, you buy a box that's big enough to handle your largest workload, and then 90% of the time it's sitting there. Well, that's a very inefficient use of money. So some things you should know before going in, and I'll say I should have worn my glasses. It would have helped quite a bit. Going to wing it. Yeah, but it's behind. So some things you should know going in, that it is not simply a matter of taking your data and your software and putting it in the cloud and everything is just going to be wonderful and roses. It's not a magic wand. It can take a significant level of effort, and just need to be aware of that and the fact that it is going to involve some things, or potentially significant things that have nothing to do with GIS at all. So what to know before you go. You've taken the plunge. You've decided that you really want to start considering that you want to do this. You need to take account of several different factors and keep these things in mind. The first of which, and perhaps the most obvious, is the data. Where and how is your data going to be stored in the cloud? Now, keep in mind that we took everything that we have, desktops, servers, DBMS, flat file storage, everything. We shifted it all into the cloud. So keep that just as a context. You may or may not end up doing that. But for us, it was on the data side. Where is our DBMS going to live? How is it going to operate? How's the DBA going to interact with it? How are the people that need the data in the database going to interact with it? Is the database software supported by the vendor? Is it going to be supported by the platform, and is it supported well? And what about your non-RDBMS spatial data, all those file geodatabases and shape files and geopackages and et cetera, how are they going to be stored and accessed? And then all the non-GIS data, your spreadsheets, Word docs, and all those things, how are people going to interact with those? And this is perhaps the sneakiest one of all. You need to identify how your workflows are going to change, and they are going to change. For the orthoimagery program, if you talk to Ben back there, he'll tell you 9 out of 10 of their workflows were significantly altered when we went to the cloud. How you interact with the data, how do you interact with people that are providing the data to you, and how do you use the data or interact with it when you're doing QC or preparatory steps to make it available. User access. So how are you going to provide user access to the data, the files, the servers, the machines for your internal users and your external users? Are you going to rely just on web services and direct contact that way? Or are you going to try and find some direct connection into the cloud for your people that still have their local desktops. And then for your internal people, they're going to still have to transact with the system in some way beyond just logging in to ArcGIS Online or whatever other platform you may have. So how are you going to accomplish that? Are you going to rely on command line, third-party tools? Are you going to remote desktop in or use SSH shell to get into that? You need to account for how these people are going to be able to remain productive on a daily basis. And then as David alluded to, there's a lot of non-GIS factors to this too, and it includes a lot of traditional IT sysadmin things like DNS, security, firewalls, and things of that nature that you may or may not be responsible for, and I'll come back to that just in a minute. So in terms of getting prepared to take a look at this, one final thing I'll say is, how are you going to measure success? And this is something that you should identify with yourself and your group and your management, your senior management. Is it primarily driven by cost? Is it driven by increased capability? Or are there other factors? And David has mentioned, and I think I just did about 30 seconds ago, that your costs may or may not go down. But there are other value components to that that are not quantitative. You know, the peace of mind that knowing that the information is available to your customers when and where they need it. Nobody would argue against the value of that. The ability to scale out and handle spikes and dips in demand. Another thing to keep in mind as you start to think through this is to take an honest assessment of you, your organization, your larger organization, and do an assessment of what skills do I have or my team have with cloud already, and what skills are available in my larger organization. And maybe you start to evaluate, okay, is this something that we can take on by ourselves, or is this something we ought to start thinking about third-party support? And to be really honest with yourselves, is it really truly warranted? I mean, are you in a case to where maybe you didn't do or don't do exactly what we did and throw everything over the fence to the cloud? Maybe you use ArcGIS Online to provide your public access, and you keep your things on-prem, and that looks, that might work for you too. Choosing a platform. GIS vendor expertise in a particular platform, that may influence where you go. Your RDBMS support and other factors there might drive you to AWS, Azure, Google, whichever one is available. And then finally, and this may be the most obvious one, taking all those things to account after you've done that assessment and that inventory, is what's your migration strategy going to be? Do you want to take everything and put it over into the cloud? Or do you want to go more of a hybrid model, or maybe an incremental model where we say, okay, we're going to start with the DBMS, and then we're going to go to the next thing and the next thing, and then really evaluate, what's the best approach for your organization. So what are the lessons learned? For us, for managers, and I can't even see that, so I'm not even going to pretend. So I'm going to wing it here a little bit. So if you're a manager, the thing you need to realize is that it is going to be a significant level of work. And if you decide to make this decision for your organization, then you need to be all in and committed to do it. If you try and do it halfway, you'll never get to the finish line. It'll stay in a muddled territory, and you won't be successful. The other thing is to be honest with your bandwidth of you, your team, and your larger organization, and the cloud expertise they have, and make an appropriate strategy to move forward. The level of effort probably is going to be higher than what you may think initially. I know that's true for us. We did fall victim to us being a small organization that tackles things and do a variety of different things, and we said, okay, this will just be one more of those. That did not turn out to be the case. And that you're going to overlook something and things do break. It's the cloud, it's quite redundant, but back up, back up, back up. For people more like myself, some things that we would try and keep in mind, even if you're technical, is realize that the cloud is something different. It does not operate the way you're used to working. Things turn off and are billed by the second. You don't need to keep that machine running or that system or that service running just because it's there and you're not going to be able to use it again. You can bring it down and bring it back up within seconds. Things change quite a bit. So for instance, just in the short time we've been in the cloud, we were running VMs to support our system. And since that time, there have been two sets of improvements made by AWS itself. So again, you can't be like the rotisserie chicken where you set it and forget it. If you want to keep optimized, keep your costs the most efficient, you need to check what those new offerings are frequently. And again, back up as best, or set up a robust backup plan. I'm just going to let you guys read that because that is a way too small font for a 53-year-old man without his glasses. But take that to heart and really use those as some bullet points if you decide to get into that. Some of these are AWS specific, some are ArcGIS and other things. The one thing I will say, just in a general AWS specific note here, when you're using these large storage buckets like we do for our raster files, imagery, LiDAR, et cetera, to use the dot syntax. And what I mean by that is when you're naming these buckets, you don't put hyphens between the words, actually use a dot. So it would be like imagery dot David dot Giordano. And that way, what that does is it makes it available for any point in the future. You can reference the data in that bucket with a simple HTTP request. And finally, I'm only a little bit over, finally our wish list, and this is kind of diving down in the weeds, but one thing that we have experimented with and have not had much experience with, but that we would really welcome is to be able to have ArcGIS Enterprise take advantage of AWS's warm pools. I'm sure Azure and the other platforms have this as well, but in an auto-scaling environment for a new server to come online currently takes about 15 to 20 minutes. Amazon Web Services has these things called warm pools where you can create a server and just have it at the ready. But there are some issues that we have not been able to overcome to bring those online in less than 2 minutes. And then the final thing, and this is just near and dear to my heart because we do deal with so much imagery, is one other thing we would really like to see happen is to be able to have what we call dynamic tiling done on the fly and take advantage of this cloud develop or CDNs that are available. So in an AWS environment, that would be CloudFront. We'd like to be able to see our system be able to dynamically create cache tiles for our imagery as they're being requested so that we're not having to pre-create a cache and have that storage cost hit us month after month. So in closing, the bullets, you can read them somewhat like I can. But what will we say now that this effort is done? It's kind of a cliche, but we didn't know what we didn't know. We've been successful. It's taken a lot of effort. The one thing we didn't realize is how much non-GIS things we would have to either undertake or learn about. But we're excited about the future of what it may offer. And what that future looks like, we don't know. But we do know that we have the capacity, agility, and scalability to more than likely accommodate it that we would never have with an on-prem system. So that's it. Here's our contact information. As David mentioned at the outset, if you guys want to grab us over the next 2 days and talk more in depth, we'd love to talk to you about it, share our victories and our pains. This was a real high level race through this content, I understand that, but please let us know, shoot us an email, and we'd love to talk. So thanks.
All right, thank you. We don't have time for group questions, but it's time for a break, so hopefully they'll be willing to stick around if you've got questions or see them anytime during the remainder of the conference. So thank you very much.